Okay, well, I just read chapter 3 twice. I'm reading chapter 4. Let's hope chapter 3 uploads by the time I'm done reading this, otherwise I will lose my mind. Okay. It's not here yet. It's fine. Chapter 4, The Safe Food Handler. Inside this chapter, there's personal hygiene and contamination and a good personal hygiene program. Some key terms are carriers, hand antiseptics, impermeable, and hair restraint. The learning objectives for this chapter are you should be able to describe the requirements for personal hygiene and cleanliness, describe how food handlers contaminate food and how to prevent contamination, identify proper hand washing techniques and procedures and hand care requirements, explain the importance of avoiding bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food, identify criteria for excluding staff from the operation or restricting them from working with or around food. Okay, Hepatitis A scare. Hepatitis A vaccinations were offered to thousands of guests who had visited a local casual dining operation in the Gulf Coast region of the United States. The vaccination was made available by the local regulatory authority after a food handler at the operation tested positive for hepatitis A, exposing the guests to the virus. The identified food handler was responsible for preparing and setting up items on the salad bar. I must stop eating salad the way they keep talking about them. The food handler was excluded from work until approved to return by a physician and the regulatory authority. The local regulatory authority also worked with the operations owner and management team to ensure that they had all of the correct processes in place to protect guests and staff. What could have been done to prevent the outbreak? 4.1 Personal hygiene. Food handlers can contaminate food and cause guests to get sick at every step in the flow. It still says uploading. Fingers crossed. 4.1 Personal hygiene and contamination. Food handlers can contaminate food and cause guests to get sick at every step in the flow of food through the operation. Good personal hygiene is a critical protective measure against foodborne illness. Think about all the things hands encounter during the day. Staff members working in the back of the house touch many things while storing, prepping, and cooking food for your guests and also for you. Not only do their hands come into contact with the actual food items, but they also touch equipment, surfaces, and many other things. In the front of the house, a busser might clear a table of dirty dishes and then begin setting the table with clean silverware. In both examples, neither person has washed their hands. This is why good personal hygiene is so important in a restaurant operation. It's vital to the health and safety of guests It's vital to the health and safety of guests that staff remembers to always put cleanliness first. How food handlers can contaminate food. You have learned that staff can make people sick by transferring pathogens when they touch food. These pathogens often come from the food handlers themselves. Like, that would never be you, right? Sneezing like... Anyways, food handlers can contaminate food in any of the following situations. When they have a foodborne illness, when they have wounds or boils that contain a pathogen, when sneezing or coughing, when they have contact with a person who is ill, when they use a restroom and do not wash their hands. These food handlers may contaminate food and food surfaces with feces from their fingers. Once someone eats food contaminated this way, a foodborne illness may result. This is called the fecal-oral route of contamination. When they have symptoms such as diarrhea, vomiting, or jaundice, a yellowing of the eyes or skin. With some illnesses, a person may infect others before showing symptoms. For example, a person could spread hepatitis A for weeks before having any symptoms. With other illnesses such as norovirus, a person may infect others for days after symptoms are gone. Some people also carry pathogens and infect others without getting sick themselves. These people are called carriers. The bacteria Staphylococcus aureus is carried in the nose of 30 to 50% of healthy adults. About 20 to 35% of healthy adults carry it on their skin as well. Food handlers transfer this bacteria to food when they touch the infected areas of their body and then touch the food. These scenarios show how easily food can be contaminated. A deli food handler diagnosed with salmonellosis failed to inform his manager that he was sick. He was later determined to be the cause of an outbreak involving more than 200 guests through 12 different items. A food handler with diarrhea did not wash his hands after using the restroom. He made close to 5,000 people sick when he mixed a vat of buttercream frosting with his bare hands and arms. Even simple acts such as rubbing the ear can result in contaminated food. Always wash your hands. Simple acts such as running fingers through the hair, wiping or touching the nose, rubbing an ear, scratching the scalp, coughing or sneezing into the hand, spitting in the operation, or touching a pimple or an infected wound/boil can also contaminate food. For this reason, food handlers need to monitor what they do with their hands. Diseases not transmitted through food. The public has expressed growing concern about communicable diseases spread through intimate contact or by direct exchange of bodily fluids. Diseases such as AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, hepatitis B and C, tuberculosis are spread in this fashion, but are not spread through food. As a manager, you should be aware of the following laws concerning staff who had tested positive for the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, which can lead to the disease AIDS if left untreated, or who have tuberculosis or hepatitis B or C. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, provides civil rights protection to those who are HIV positive or do have hepatitis B. This prohibits employers from firing people or transferring them out of food handling duties simply because they have these illnesses. Employers should maintain the confidentiality of any staff members who have an illness that is not foodborne. Knowledge check. List at least 5 situations which food handlers contaminate food. As it relates to food, what is a carrier? Please, 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 please. How long is it gonna load for? 4.2. A good personal hygiene program. Food handlers must not only have the correct knowledge, skills, attitudes toward personal hygiene, but also know they can contaminate food if they are not careful. Good personal hygiene can mean different things to different people. It can be slightly different for each person based on their background and personal beliefs. But in a restaurant or food service operation, personal hygiene has a very specific meaning, and there are some general guidelines that every employee can and should follow when working in a restaurant operation. Not following good hygiene practices can lead to contamination of food. Simple acts such as not washing hands after using the bathroom or wearing a dirty uniform can potentially cause many customers to fall ill. Failing to take steps to cover open wounds or report an illness can also contaminate food. To keep food handlers from contaminating food, your operation needs a good personal hygiene program. A good personal hygiene program also helps everyone feel confident in the cleanliness of the business. As a manager, you should make sure this program succeeds. Do not underestimate your role in a personal hygiene program. You have a responsibility to create the program and make sure it works. Some things to support a personal hygiene program include creating personal hygiene policies, training food handlers on these policies, and retraining them regularly, modeling the correct behavior at all times, supervising food safety practices at all times, revising personal hygiene policies when laws or sciences change. This manager that I'm about to show you right now is modeling good personal hygiene practices by wearing clean clothes, a hair restraint, and gloves. Good man. Managing personal hygiene programs. Depending on the size and type of your operation, personal hygiene programs will be created differently. Personal hygiene programs for large-scale operations may start at the corporate level. Frontline managers are then responsible for making sure the program is implemented. For smaller case operations, the general manager is usually in charge of creating the program. It is the responsibility of all managers to maintain the program no matter where it is created. Managers must ensure their staff are following the regulations that have been established. This will reduce the risk of contamination of food and foodborne illnesses. Managers are also responsible for taking corrective action when problems are found. This may include retraining employees when incorrect procedures are being observed. Managers also need to retrain employees when changes have been made to any parts of the program. Okay, hand washing. Every day, our hands touch surfaces covered with pathogens that we cannot see. Remember, even healthy people can spread pathogens. For this reason, hand washing is the most important part of personal hygiene. It may seem basic and routine. However, many food handlers fail to wash their hands correctly, and as often as needed. You must train your food handlers to wash their hands, and then you must monitor them. She's using a designated hand washing sink. Where to wash hands. Hands must be washed in a sink designated for hand washing. Monitor food handlers to make sure they do this. They should never wash their hands in sink designated for food prep or dishwashing, or sinks used for discarding wastewater. How to wash hands. Well, I hope you know this, but to wash hands or prosthetic devices correctly, follow these steps. The whole process should take at least 20 seconds. Wet hands and arms, use running warm water. Apply soap. Make sure there's enough soap to build up a good lather. Follow the manufacturer's recommendation. Scrub hands and arms vigorously for 15 to 10 seconds. Clean the fingertips under the nails and between fingers. Rinse hands and arms thoroughly. Use running warm water. And dry hands and arms. Use a single-use paper towel or a hand dryer. If you're not careful, you can contaminate your hands after washing them. Consider using a paper towel to turn off the faucet and to open the door when leaving the restroom. I always do that. See this? Very cute. That. When to wash hands. Food handlers must wash their hands before preparing food or working with clean equipment and utensils. They must also wash their hands before putting on single-use gloves. Food handlers must wash their hands after the following activities. Oh, this is upside down, babes. This is upside down. Too lucky I noticed. Okay. 1. Using the restroom. Touching the body or clothing, sneezing, coughing, blowing their nose, or using a handkerchief or tissue. Eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing gum or tobacco. Handling stored items, handling raw meat, poultry and seafood, taking out garbage, handling service animals or aquatic animals, handling chemicals that might affect food safety, changing tasks before beginning a new task, leaving and returning to the kitchen prep area, handling money, using electronic services, and touching anything else that may contaminate hands, such as dirty equipment, work surfaces, or clothes. And remember, this is when you should wash hands. After you do these things, you need to wash your hands. Always wash hands before unloading clean and sanitized dishes. Also, corrective. If you see corrective action, if you see food handlers who are not following proper hand washing procedures, correct the situation immediately. If they have touched food or food contact surfaces with unclean hands. Side note, cell phones are items that may be contaminated with pathogens. Wash hands after handling a phone and before returning to work with food or equipment. Okay. This is corrective action. If they have touched food or food contact surface with the clean hands, dispose of the contaminated food. This is the corrective action you take. Clean potentially contaminated equipment and utensils. Retain or coach food handlers who are not following, or retrain or coach food handlers who are not following proper hand washing procedures if necessary. Hand antiseptics. Hand antiseptics, also called hand sanitizers, are liquids or gels that help lower the number of pathogens on skin. If used, they must comply with the Code of Federal Regulations and Food and Drug Administration standards. Only use hand antiseptics after hand washing. Never use them in place of it. Wait for a hand antiseptic to dry before you touch food or equipment. Hand care. In addition to hand washing, hands need other care to prevent the spread of pathogens. Make sure food handlers Follow the guidelines in Table 4A. Table 4A, this. Your fingernail length should be short. No fake nails. Can't do your nails. Do not. And no polishes. Okay. Hand care. Hand care. In addition to washing hands need bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food. Food can become contaminated when it has been handled with bare hands. This is especially true when hands have not been washed correctly or have infected cuts or wounds. For this reason, do not handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands. And if you primarily serve a high-risk population, never handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands. However, there may be exceptions. It may be acceptable to handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands in these situations. The food will be added as an ingredient to a dish that does not contain raw meat, seafood, or poultry, but will be cooked to at least 145 degrees Fahrenheit. For example, adding cheese to pizza dough. The food will be added as an ingredient to a dish containing raw meat, seafood, or poultry, and the dish will be cooked to the required minimum internal temperature of the raw items. For example, adding seasonings to raw meat. This food handler is adding seasonings with bare hands, while the seasonings are ready to eat. Bare hand contact is allowed because this item will be cooked later. Some regulatory authorities allow bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food. If your jurisdiction allows this, you should have specific policies in place about staff health. You must also train staff in hand washing and personal hygiene practices. Check your local regulatory requirements. Okay, now we're gonna go through the Table 4A. You should keep your fingernails short, right? Keep fingernails short and clean. Long fingernails may be hard to keep clean and can rip gloves. They also chip and become physical contaminants. They can also chip and become physical contaminants. Fingernails should be kept trimmed and filed. This will allow nails to be cleaned easily. Rugged nails can be hard to keep clean. They also may hold pathogens and break off, becoming physical contaminants. Do not wear false fingernails. They can be hard to keep clean. They can also break up into the food, but you can use them if you use single-use gloves. Don't wear nail polish. It can disguise dirt and may flake up into the food. You can use it if you wear single-use gloves. Now, if you have infected wounds or boils, that means they contain pus. They must be covered if they are open or draining to prevent pathogens from contaminating food or food contact surfaces. How an infected wound or boil is covered depends on where it is located. If the wound is located on the hand, finger, or wrist, then cover it with an impermeable cover like a finger cut or a bandage. Impermeable means you can't get through it. This is what they mean. Something like that for fingers. Impermeable from the wood cannot pass through the cover. Examples include bandages and finger cuts. And finger cuts. Place a single-use glove over the cover. If the wound or boil is located on the arm, then cover it with an impermeable cover, such as a bandage. The wound must be completely covered. If the wound or boil is located on another part of the body, then cover it with a dry, durable, tight-fitting bandage. Okay, ready-to-eat food. Ready-to-eat food is exactly what it sounds like. It is food that can be eaten without any further prepping, cooking, or washing. When dealing with ready-to-eat food, it is necessary to avoid bare hand contact by wearing gloves or using utensils such as scoops or tongs. Items on a salad bar are a good example of ready-to-eat food that require the use of gloves or utensils. Nothing further will be done to the vegetables in the salad bar before they are eaten. When food handlers are prepping these items, they need to wear gloves or you use utensils to make sure there's no bare hand contact and no contamination. However, if a food handler is prepping these same veggies for soup or stew, then gloves are not necessary. Cooking the vegetables will make them safe to use. See? Ready to eat? She's making a burger, searching the lettuce and tomatoes, gloved. Single-use gloves. Many operations use single-use gloves when handling food. As the name implies, single-use gloves are designated for one task, after which they must be discarded. Used properly, they can help keep food safe by creating a barrier between hands and food. However, single-use gloves should never be used in place of hand washing. Single-use gloves should always be worn when handling ready-to-eat food. Gloves do not need to be worn when washing produce. They also do not need to be worn when handling ready-to-eat ingredients for a dish that will be cooked to the correct internal temperature. Buying gloves. Follow these guidelines when purchasing single-use gloves. Approved gloves. Purchase only gloves approved for food service. Disposable gloves. Buy only single-use gloves for handling food. Never wash and reuse gloves. Different types. Supply different gloves for different tasks. Long gloves, for example, should be used for hand mixing salads. Colored gloves can also be used to prevent cross-contamination. Multiple sizes. Provide gloves of varying sizes. Latex alternatives. Some food handlers and guests may be sensitive to latex. Consider providing gloves made from other material. How to use gloves. When using single-use gloves, follow these guidelines to prevent contamination. Wash your hands before putting on gloves when starting a new task. You do not need to rewash your hands each time you change gloves as long as you are performing the same task and your hands have not become contaminated. Choose the correct glove size. Gloves that are too big will not stay on. Those that are too small will tear or rip easily. Hold gloves by the edge when putting them on. Avoid touching the glove as much as possible. Once you put them on, check the gloves for rips or tears. You never blow into your gloves. Never roll gloves to make them easier to put on. Never wash and reuse gloves. The example is somebody, I'll just show it to you. Well-fitting gloves. There's no rips or tears. When to change gloves. Food handlers must change single-use gloves at these times. As soon as the gloves become dirty or torn, before beginning a different task, after an interruption such as taking a phone call, after handling raw meat, seafood, or poultry, and before handling ready-to-eat food. After 4 hours of continuous use. Gloves can give food handlers a false sense of security. Gloves can give food handlers a false sense of security, especially if they are not changed as often as they should be. Reinforce correct glove use with all food handlers. This chapter will never end, Michael. No. It's over. Other good personal hygiene practices. Personal hygiene can be a touchy subject for some, but because it is so important to food safety, managers should address the subject with every food handler. Personal cleanliness. Pathogens can be found on hair and skin. They have greatest risk of being transmitted to food and food equipment if food handlers do not shower or bathe before work. Make sure all staff members do this. Correct work attire. Food handlers in dirty clothes may give a bad impression of your operation. More important, dirty clothes may carry pathogens that can cause foodborne illnesses. These pathogens can be transferred from the clothing to the hands and to the food being prepped. Set up a dress code and make sure staff follows the code. The code should include the guidelines listed in Table 4B, which we will go through in a second. These requirements should be included in written policies that are both monitored and enforced. Newly hired staff who have not started working yet should also be made aware of these policies. This cook is using a proper container with a lid and straw to avoid contamination of food or food contact surfaces. Big boy right here. Eating, drinking, smoking, and chewing gum or tobacco. Small droplets of saliva can contain thousands of pathogens. Eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing gum or tobacco can transfer saliva to hands or directly to food being handled. To prevent this, employees should only eat, drink, smoke, or chew gum or tobacco in designated areas. Never do this when prepping or serving food, working in prep areas, working in areas used to clean utensils and equipment. Employees can drink from a covered container if they handle the container carefully to prevent contamination of their hands, the container, and exposed food, utensils, and equipment. Okay, so basically they can use it if there's no exposure to contamination. A properly covered container will include a lid with a straw or a single lid top. This food handler is tasting food with an approved utensil and using it only once. If food must be tasted during prepping, use an approved utensil and only use that utensil once. Okay, this is table 4B. Let's go through it. Come on. Work attire guidelines. You should have a hair restraint. Wear a clean hat or other hair restraint when in a food prep area. This can keep hair from falling into food and onto food contact surfaces. Do not wear hair accessories that could become contaminants. Hair accessories should be limited to items that keep hands out of hair and hair out of food. Do not wear false eyelashes while I'm out. They can become physical contaminants. Food handlers with facial hair should also wear a beard restraint. Clean clothing. Wear clean clothing daily. Change soiled uniforms, including aprons, as needed to prevent contamination. If possible, change into work clothes at work. Store street clothing and personal belongings in designated areas. This includes items such as backpacks, jackets, electronic devices, keys, and personal medications. Make sure these items are stored in a way that does not contaminate food contact surface, and linens. Keep dirty clothing that is stored in the operation away from food and prep areas. You can do this by placing dirty clothes in non-absorbent containers or washable laundry bags. This includes dirty aprons, chef coats, and other uniforms. Aprons. Remove aprons when leaving prep areas. For example, aprons should be removed and stored before taking out garbage or using the restroom. Never wipe your hands on your apron. Jewelry. Remove jewelry from hands and arms for prepping food or when walking around prep areas. Food handlers cannot wear any of the following: rings, except for plain band. Bracelets, including medical bracelets, watches. Your company may also require you to remove other types of jewelry. This may include earrings, necklaces, and facial jewelry. These items can fall off and become physical contaminants. Ornate jewelry can be difficult to clean and can hold pathogens. Servers may wear jewelry if allowed by company policy. We're almost there. Reporting health issues. Require staff members to let you know when they're sick. This includes newly hired staff who have not started working yet. Your regulatory authority may ask for proof that you have done this. You can provide it in the following ways: present signed statements in which staff has agreed to report illness. Provide documentation showing staff has completed training, which includes information on the importance of reporting illness. Posting signs or providing pocket cards that remind staff to notify managers when they are sick. Reporting illness. Staff must report illness before they come to work. They should also let you know immediately if they get sick while working. When food handlers are ill, you may need to restrict them from working with exposed food, utensils, and equipment. Sometimes, you may even need to exclude sick employees from coming into the operation. This is especially important if they have certain symptoms such as vomiting, diarrhea, jaundice, yellow skin or eyes, sore throat with fever, infected wound or bowel that is open or draining, unless properly covered. Don't be like this guy. He came into work and he's coughing. Staff must also tell you when they have been diagnosed with an illness from one of these pathogens: norovirus, hepatitis A, Shigella spp, sugar toxin producing E. coli, Salmonella typhi, and Nantophylosalmonella, the big six basically. They must also tell you if they live with somebody who has been diagnosed with any of these illnesses, except Nantophylosalmonella. If a food handler is diagnosed with an illness from any of these pathogens, you must report the illness to a regulatory authority. See table 4C. We'll get that. Watching for staff illness. As a manager, you should watch food handlers for signs of illness. That could include watching for things like vomiting, excessive trips to the bathroom, yellowing of the skin, eyes, and fingernails, cold sweats or chills, indicating a fever, and persistent nasal discharge and sneezing. Restricting or excluding staff for medical conditions. Use table 4C on the following page to help you decide how to handle staff illnesses. and other medical conditions that can affect food safety. Note that for most illnesses, however, you should work with your local regulatory authority to determine how to respond. The chart is only a guide. Work with your local regulatory authority to determine the best course of action. Distress. The manager should notice that basically. Okay, this is for so how to handle medical conditions. If the food handler has an infected wound or ball that is not properly covered, restrict the food handler from working with exposed food utensils and equipment. If they have a sore throat with a fever, restrict from working with exposed foods and exclude them from the operation if you serve a high-risk population. If they have persistent coughing, sneezing, or a runny nose, restrict them from working with exposed foods, utensils, and equipment. If they are vomiting, diarrhea, or have jaundice, exclude the food handler from the operation. For vomiting and diarrhea, food handlers must meet one of these requirements before they can return to work. They must have no symptoms for at least 24 hours, and have a medical note. And for jaundice, they must be reported to the regulatory authorities. If you've had it for 7 days or less, you must be excluded from the operation. And you must have a medical note to continue working. If you're vomiting or have diarrhea and have been diagnosed with an illness caused by either norovirus, Shigella spp, non-typhoid or Salmonella or E. coli, or has been diagnosed with hepatitis A or Salmonella typhi, you should be excluded and report the situation to the regulatory authorities. Knowledge check. What are some steps for proper hand washing? And cook at a restaurant located in a shopping mall has a sore throat with a fever. What action must the manager take? I'm doing the study questions. Should I do the summary? I'm not doing the summary. I did the summary for chapter 3. I might as well do the chapter 5. Fine, summary. Food handlers pose a greater risk for contaminating food when they have a foodborne illness, wounds or burns that contain a pathogen. Punctuation is so important. It's so important to read the punctuation. Let me start over. Food handlers pose a greater risk for contaminating food when they have a foodborne illness, wounds or burns that contain a pathogen, contact with someone who is ill, or symptoms such as sneezing, coughing, diarrhea, vomiting, or jaundice. The risk is also greater when food handlers use the restroom and do not wash their hands. Other common ways that food handlers can contaminate food include touching their scalp, hair, nose, or ears, touching a pimple or wound, wearing and touching a dirty uniform, coughing or sneezing into hands, and spitting in the operation. Hands must be cared for and washed correctly. They must be washed at a sink designated for hand washing. They also must be washed at the correct times. This includes before preparing food, working with clean equipment and utensils, putting on single-use gloves, and starting a new task. Food handlers must also wash their hands after using the restroom and after any activities that can contaminate their hands. Hand antiseptics should never be used in place of hand washing. Single-use gloves must be worn when handling ready-to-eat food. Wash hands before putting on gloves. Wear gloves that are the correct size. Avoid touching the gloves when you put them on. Change your gloves when they are dirty or torn before starting a new task, after interruption in your task, after handling raw meat, seafood or poultry, and before handling ready-to-eat food, and after 4 hours of continuous use. Never handle ready-to-eat food with bare hands if you serve a primarily high-risk population. Food handlers should shower or bathe before going to work. Food handlers also must put on clean clothing and a hair restraint before handling food or working in prep areas. They must remove jewelry from hands and arms. Aprons should always be removed and stored when staff members leave prep areas. If they have a wound or boil, it must be covered correctly. Food handlers should never eat, smoke, or chew gum or tobacco in food prep or service areas, or in areas designated for cleaning. Require staff to report health problems to management. Managers should also watch for staff illnesses. Managers must exclude or restrict food handlers who have certain symptoms or medical conditions. Check with your regulatory authority for requirements that apply to your operation. Discussion questions. What are some basic work attire requirements for staff? 2. What personal behaviors can contaminate food? 3. What are some basic guidelines for hand care? 4. What procedures must food handlers follow when using gloves? 5. What staff health problems pose a possible threat to food safety? What are the appropriate actions that should be taken? When handling produce, when must single-use gloves be worn? Okay. Apply your knowledge. Robert's day. Robert is a food handler at a deli. It's 7:47 a.m. He just woke up. He is scheduled to be at work and ready to go by 8 a.m. When he gets out of bed, his stomach feels queasy. He blames that on the beer he had the night before. Fortunately, Robert only lives 5 minutes from work. Despite this, he does not have enough time to take a shower. He grabs the same uniform he wore the day before when prepping chicken. He also puts on his watch and several rings. Robert does not have luck on his side today. On the way to the deli, his oil light comes on. He is forced to pull off the road and add oil to his car. When he gets to work, he realizes that he has left his hat at home. Robert is greeted by an angry manager. The manager puts Robert to work right away, loading the rotisserie with raw chicken. Robert then moves to serving a guest who orders a freshly made salad. Robert is known for his salad and makes the salad to the guest's approval. The manager asks Robert to take out the garbage and then make potato salad for the lunch hour rush. On the way back from the garbage run, Robert tells the manager that his stomach is bothering him. The manager, thinking of his stuff shortage, asks Robert to stick it out as long as he can. Robert agrees and gets out the ingredients for the potato salad. Then he heads to the restroom in hope of relieving his symptoms. After quickly rinsing his hands in the restroom, he finds that the paper towels have run out. Short of time, he wipes his hands on his apron. The manager tells Robert to clean the few tables in the deli that are available for guests. When finished, Robert grabs a piece of chicken from the rotisserie for a snack. He takes the chicken with him to the prep area so he can get back to making the potato salad. What did Robert and his manager do wrong? You have like 10 minutes. Okay, Kurt's dilemma. Kurt was awake off and on throughout the night with diarrhea and vomiting. When he woke up the next morning, he did not feel that much better, even though the vomiting and diarrhea had stopped. He decided that it might be a good idea to take the day off from the cafe where he worked. The cafe was a very popular place to eat among college students in a large university town. Kurt's boss, Jackie, answered the phone when he called. At first, she could not believe what she was hearing. Kurt was calling in sick when he knew it was going to be an incredibly busy shift. The cafe was already running short of staff. Jackie questioned Kurt about his symptoms. Then she asked if he could come in long enough to get them through the rush. Jackie was now worried because Kurt was no longer vomiting and did not have diarrhea. Because he needed the money, Kurt decided to go to work with the promise that he could go home as soon as the lunch rush was over. What did Jackie do wrong, and what should she have done differently? Okay, study questions. 1. A food handler has just taken out the trash. What should she do next? Put on old gloves. B. Wipe her hands on her apron. C. Wash her hands. Or D. Use hand sanitizer. 2. What should food handlers do after prepping food and before using the restroom? A. Wash their hands. B. Take off their hats. C. Change their gloves. Or D. Change their aprons. 3. A food handler has an infected cut on his finger. He washed the cut and put new gloves on before prepping food. What did the food handler forget to do? A. Use hand sanitizer. B. Use the old gloves. C. Put on a bandage. Or D. Put on a new apron. 4. When should hand antiseptics be used? A. After washing hands. B. Before washing hands. C. When soap is unavailable. Or D. When gloves are not being used. Number 5. Who is most at risk of contaminating food? A. A food handler whose sister works at a daycare. B. A food handler whose young son has vomiting. C. A food handler who gets a lot of headaches. Or D. A food handler who has an allergy. 6. A cook wore single-use gloves while forming raw ground beef into patties. The cook continued to wear them while slicing hamburger buns. What mistake was made? A. The cook did not clean and sanitize the gloves before handling the hamburger buns. B. The cook did not wash hands and put on new gloves before slicing the hamburger buns. C. The cook did not wash hands before putting on the same gloves to slice the hamburger buns. Or D. The cook did not wear reusable gloves while handling raw ground beef and hamburger buns. Question 7. When washing hands, what is the minimum time you should scrub with soap? A. 10 seconds. B. 20 seconds. C. 30 seconds. D. 40 seconds. Number 8. A food handler prepares and delivers meals to elderly people. What symptoms require this food handler to stay home from work? A. Thirst with itching. B. Soreness with fatigue. C. Soreness with fever. Or D. Headache with soreness. I'll go with the soreness with fever because that's like you can infect people, you can contaminate. 9. Under which condition are single-use gloves not required? A. When handling ready-to-eat food. B. When chopping vegetables for a salad bar. C. When prepping sandwiches. Or D. When adding seasonings to raw meat. 10. What should a manager of a staff cafeteria do if a cook calls in with a headache, nausea, and diarrhea? A. Take the cook to go to the doctor and then tell the cook to go to the doctor and then come directly to work. B. Tell the cook to come in for a half day and then go see the doctor. C. Tell the cook to rest for half a day then come to work. Or D. Tell the cook to not come into work and go see a doctor. Okay, chapter 4 done.